I taught fifth graders for 42 years. I could spot a lie before it landed. But I never expected the worst lie would come from my own grandson, who tricked me into a care home to steal my pension. So I did what any good educator would. I took notes, built my case, and let them think I was fading, until I made the whole world watch what it looks like when justice gets her voice back. My name is Doris Langston, 78 years old, retired school principal, still sharp enough to finish a New York Times crossword in ink, though my knees aren't what they used to be. A fall on the porch last month set me back, minor surgery, 3 screws in my left knee, and a walker the first hated. But I was managing. I had a system. And more importantly, I had my home. That night, me grandson Brian kept calling me Grams, like he used to when he wanted something. And Linda, his mother, my late husband's daughter-in-law, hovered, pretending to tidy up. "You shouldn't be climbing those stairs," she said, watching me like I might topple over right there. "What if you fall again?" "I won't." I stabbed at the rice with chopsticks. "It's 1 floor, and I've got handrails everywhere," Brian chimed in, setting down his fork like it was some sort of gavel. "Still, Grams, we're just worried. This house is too much for you now. You should be somewhere safer. Just for a little while." "A little while," Linda echoed. My gut tightened. I sipped my tea. "You mean a facility?" They both launched into a well-rehearsed monologue, how it was temporary, how the place had activities and doctors on site, how lots of vibrant seniors love it there. Like I was a brochure. My heart thumped hard in my chest, and not just from the sodium. "It's just while you recover, Grams," Brian said, all wide-eyed innocence. "Until your knee's stronger. And I'll take care of all the paperwork. We already got a tour booked for tomorrow." I should have said no. I wanted to say no. But the pain had been bad that week. And the loneliness, even worse. They offered a ride to the tour, said they'd take me to lunch after. I agreed, just to get them to leave. Big mistake. The next morning, they arrived early. Too early. Brian helped me pack a small bag. "Just a few things," he said, "so you're comfortable." Then Linda handed me a folder and a pen. "Just sign here," she said. "They need consent before you can tour." I glanced at the paper. Paragraphs and fine print. My knee ached. My head buzzed. "Why does it say power of attorney?" Brian leaned in, voice low, like a secret. "Just a standard form, Grams. In case of emergencies. I won't use it unless I have to." I hesitated. He looked so sincere, so earnest. I signed. Later, I would stare at that signature like it was a gun I'd handed them. The facility was shiny and cold. Corporate, not cozy. A receptionist with a too-wide smile, like she was selling condos. The tour was brief, polished, perfunctory. I remember the beige carpet, the scent of antiseptic and artificial vanilla, the bland music piping through the halls. When I turned to leave, Brian put a hand on my shoulder. "There's been a change of plans," he said. My stomach dropped. "What?" "You'll be staying here, Grams, just until things settle down." The doctor signed off, and we moved your prescriptions. Everything's ready. I felt the room tilt. "I never agreed to stay," I said, voice thin. Linda stepped in. "It's already arranged, Doris. You'll be comfortable. You'll have people around. This is for the best." I looked at Brian, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "I want to go home," I said, gripping the walker. But my phone was gone. So was my purse. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be," Linda said, her voice a blade wrapped in flannel. A staff member appeared, young, kind-faced, clueless. She took my arm gently, guided me down the hall as I stared back at my grandson. Brian waved. That night, I sat on a twin bed in a room with plastic furniture and a single framed print of a lighthouse. I stared at the closed door. My knees throbbed, my chest burned. But the pain wasn't from the fall. It was from the betrayal. They dumped me here like an old coat they didn't want to throw away but didn't want to wear anymore either. And I had signed the paper. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I made a vow. They thought I was too old to fight back. They were dead wrong. It didn't take long for the truth to settle in. The next morning, a nurse brought me a tiny cup with 2 pills and a warm, too sweet smile. "Time for your meds, Ms. Langston." I asked for my phone. She blinked. "It's not listed on your items. Maybe a family member took it home?" I stared at her, silent. My hand trembled as I took the cup. The water was lukewarm. They'd really done it. Took my phone. My bag. My voice. The room had no clock, no calendar. Just a laminated list of engaging activities tacked to the bulletin board. Bingo at 10. Chair yoga at 1. Memory circle at 3. Memory circle. My blood ran cold. I shuffled down the hall later that day with my walker, trying to get a look at the front desk, thinking maybe I could use their phone. But they intercepted me before I even reached the elevator. "Let's get you to music hour," a nurse chirped. "Routine's important." I smiled politely. I used to be good at that, smiling politely while someone underestimated me. Back in my principal days, they used to say I was too cold, too strict. Parents didn't always like me, but they respected me. My teachers did too. I ran that school like a ship. If a kid lied to me, I knew. If a parent tried to manipulate me, I saw it coming a mile off. But I never expected my own grandson to pull a stunt like this. That night, after a dinner I couldn't taste and a round of introductions I didn't ask for, I was back in my room when I heard the click of the doorknob. Locked from the outside. Just a soft, mechanical click. I sat there for a long time. No TV. No noise. Just me and the faint hum of the fluorescent hallway lights. That's when the panic came. Quiet, creeping, like floodwater under a door. I reached for the drawer beside the bed, praying they hadn't taken everything. There it was. My notebook. Leather-bound. Worn smooth on the corners. I used to keep lesson plans in it. Now I'd keep something else. I wrote the date at the top of the page, September 3rd. Then, in careful print, they locked the door tonight. I filled 3 pages with everything I could remember. The pills, the names of the nurses, every sentence Linda said. I wasn't just documenting. I was building a case. That night, I dreamed of my old classroom. Rows of empty desks, me standing at the blackboard with no chalk, no voice, just silence. The next day, I finally caught a glimpse of Brian. On social media, of course. One of the aides had left the rec room TV on, streaming a video feed from some live app. There he was, my grandson, standing beside a brand new motorcycle, grinning like he'd won the lottery. The caption read, "Treating myself, life short. Blackheart, #no regrets." The bike gleamed under sunlight. Custom paint, top-line model. I felt sick. The comments were even worse. Someone had written, "Thought you were broke, bro." And Brian had replied, "Grams took care of me. Finally getting what I deserve. She's losing it anyway." That's when I knew. They weren't just trying to help. They were helping themselves. That same afternoon, a staff member asked if I wanted to attend early memory care orientation. Said Brian had requested it. I smiled. Sure, sounds fun. Then I shuffled back to my room, opened my notebook, and wrote in capital letters, "He's telling people I have dementia." By that evening, my whole identity had been rewritten. I was no longer Doris Langston, retired educator, capable and lucid. I was a confused old woman with early memory loss, quiet, compliant, invisible. That night I asked for my file. A nurse raised her brow but said she'd check. She never came back. But someone else did. Linda. She showed up the next morning with a tote bag of useless junk, crosswords I didn't need, a sweater I didn't ask for, and that same syrupy smile. "I know it's an adjustment," she said, sitting like a guest of honor beside my bed. "But they say you're settling in nicely." I said nothing. She glanced around the room, then leaned in, lowering her voice. "Look, Doris, this isn't forever. It's just until we stabilize things. You've had a long life. Let Brian take care of the heavy stuff now. That's what family does." I stared at her. I wanted to say 1,000 things, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled. "Of course, Linda." You're right. I'm lucky to have you both. Her shoulders relaxed. She patted my hand. When she left, I added another note to my book. They think I believe them. I'd learned a long time ago, as a principal and a woman, that power doesn't always come from shouting. Sometimes, it's in the quiet, the pause before the storm. They thought they'd buried me, but I was already digging a tunnel out. You ever feel like you're fading right in front of people? Not vanishing, not dying, just fading. Like one of those old Polaroids left too long in the sun. That's what it felt like by week 2. The first real blow came at breakfast. A new aide, a young thing with chipped nails and half a ponytail, called me sweetie and looped a bib around my neck. Not a napkin, a bib, pale pink with a cartoon duck on it. I grabbed her wrist before she could snap the Velcro shut. I don't need that. She blinked, startled. Oh, I just thought, memory patients usually. I'm not a memory patient. She flushed, muttered something, and pulled it back. But the damage was done. The other residents had seen. One man, Harold I think, gave me a pitying look over his oatmeal. The next day, it happened again. Different aide, same bib. This time, I let it happen. Because I had a plan. Each little humiliation, I wrote down. Dates, names, details. I was building a record, page by page. And then came the activities. Twice a day, like clockwork, they wheeled me into some room with beige carpet and dying plants. A peppy woman named Carly would stand in front of a whiteboard, shouting trivia like we were toddlers in a spelling bee. "What's the capital of Nevada?" she chirped. A woman 2 seats down from me called out, "Applesauce." Carly clapped like it was brilliant. I gave the correct answer, Carson City, but Carly didn't even look my way. Just moved on, all smiles and soft claps. By Thursday, they had me in an art class for cognitive stimulation. Let me tell you, the irony wasn't lost on me. I taught gifted children for 42 years. I used to mentor new teachers on curriculum design. And now here I was, being handed a coloring book with farm animals. Linda visited that afternoon, sat in a plastic chair like she was slumming it. She looked around and made a face. "It's not as modern as I thought," she said. "But they're trained professionals, and the staff says you're adjusting well. So that's good." I asked if she could bring me my old crossword books from home. She blinked. "Wouldn't that be frustrating? Maybe stick with something simpler. Like word searches?" Word searches. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Later that evening, as I sat in the TV lounge pretending to enjoy an old black and white rerun, I heard them. 2 staff members by the hallway. "Is that the Langston woman?" One whispered. "Early stage, I think. The family says she gets confused a lot." The other nodded. "She's sweet though. Harmless. Sweet. Harmless." I gripped my notebook tighter, knuckles white. Sweet was what they called you when they didn't believe you could fight back. Harmless meant they weren't afraid of what you knew. They should have been. That night, as I scribbled in the soft lamplight beside my bed, I replayed Linda's visit in my mind. How she patted my hand like a visiting nurse. How she talked over me to the staff. How she never, not once, asked what I wanted. And Brian? Nowhere in sight. But I saw his life unfolding online. Janice, the only staff member who actually saw me as a person, snuck me her phone once. I scrolled his Instagram while pretending to do Sudoku. He was living large. New jackets, fancy dinners, a selfie at a casino with a drink in hand, #grandma money. That was the caption. I nearly dropped the phone. That night, I couldn't sleep. My roommate snored softly in the next bed, the fluorescent hallway light leaking in under the door. I stared at the ceiling. Linda had won. Brian was spending everything I'd built, and I was locked in here, dressed like a toddler, fed like a prisoner, treated like I was gone before I was even dead. But as the tears finally came, slow and hot, I made another vow. I was going to become the kind of old woman they feared. Not the sweet one, not the quiet one, the kind who watched, the kind who remembered. It was the nurse with the clunky bracelets who slipped up. She came in to check my blood pressure. Big smile, like always, gums pink from too much bubble gum, and while wrapping the cuff around my arm, she said it without thinking. "Your grandson's so generous, paying out of pocket for your care. That's rare these days." My chest went still. I looked at her, steady. "What did you say?" She blinked, faltered. "Oh, I mean, he's handling the payments. On your behalf, I guess." "He told you that?" She flustered. "Well, it's in the system. Power of attorney and all. It's listed." That was the first time I truly felt the chains. It wasn't just a cruel little game anymore. Brian wasn't just stealing from me. He was spending my pension on the very prison he'd put me in and painting it as charity. I smiled at the nurse, nodded like it was fine, then picked up my notebook the moment she left. Confirmed. He's paying for facility fees using my pension. Staff believes he's funding it personally. No mention of my name on payment records. That afternoon, I started testing them. I called the front desk and asked to speak with my financial caseworker. They told me Brian handled all that now. I asked to see a copy of my own monthly statement. "Sorry, ma'am," they said. "That information has to go through your appointed POA." I asked to call my bank directly. "Your line's been deactivated," they said. "Your family thought it was confusing for you." My rage simmered. That night I sat on my bed, lights low, knees throbbing, and I made a decision. If they thought I was confused, I'd give them a performance. The next morning, during breakfast, I stared blankly at my tray. One of the aides asked if I wanted orange juice. I said, "What's juice?" She blinked. "You mean, you want something else?" I tilted my head. "Are you my sister?" From then on, I played it soft, vacant, just a little off, not all the time, just enough to make them relax, enough to make them talk more freely around me. It worked. By day 3, they started ignoring me in the hallway like I couldn't understand. One of the orderlies joked near the elevator, "That Langston lady doesn't even remember what day it is." I almost smiled. Good. Let them believe that. In the meantime, I kept writing, filling up the margins of my notebook with names, overheard conversations, timestamps, the staff, the medication changes, every subtle shift. But it was Brian's birthday that truly sealed it. I saw the photos from Janice's tablet, a public post, not even private. That's how arrogant he'd become. The whole thing was at some rooftop bar downtown. Neon lights, gold balloons spelling out 31, custom cake with chocolate cigar toppers. The caption? 31 never looked so rich. "Thanks for the good genes, Grams." I read it twice, then again. Then I clicked the comments. One said, "Wait, thought your grandma was sick?" Brian replied, "She's in memory care now. We're taking care of her full time." Another one said, "Where's the money coming from? You broke, LOL." And Brian, ever the charmer, wrote, "Don't worry, got a steady drip. Old folks come with benefits." I closed the tablet before I threw it across the room. He used my money for a rooftop bar. He told the internet I was gone. And Linda? I knew she was involved. That woman never did anything without a spreadsheet and a motive. That night, I went to Janice. She was the only one who looked me in the eye when I spoke, who didn't correct me like I was a child, who brought extra pudding when she knew my knees ached too much to walk. I waited until the lights were low and the halls were quiet. "Janice," I said softly, "how do you feel about secrets?" She paused. "Depends who's asking." I opened my notebook. I watched her eyes scan the pages, the dates, the quotes, the bank questions, the photos. She looked up at me, then sat down hard on the edge of my bed. "You're not confused?" "No, Janice, I'm not." She stared for a long moment, then exhaled. "Jesus." I smiled. "That's what I said." We talked for 2 hours that night, in whispers, behind a closed door. Janice told me something that almost broke me. Brian had asked to move me to full memory care, claimed I was getting worse, wanted it documented. had already requested evaluations. My throat tightened. That's when Janice leaned in. If you're building a case, Doris, you're going to need more than notes. I nodded slowly. I know. Then it's time to get you a lawyer. I looked her in the eye. No, not just a lawyer. I pulled out an old photo from my drawer. Folded, faded. A man in wireframe glasses and a courtroom smile. My old friend. Retired attorney. We taught Sunday school together back in the day. Janice took the photo. Think he'd help you? Brian and Linda thought they'd buried me under beige walls and bingo schedules. But what they didn't realize is that I'd spent decades reading between the lines of children's excuses and parents' lies. I was trained in uncovering half-truths and turning them into full consequences. Now, it was my turn. The morning after Janice saw my notebook, she slipped into my room with a wink and a folded napkin. "Message inside," she whispered, setting it on my tray like it was a slice of toast. Inside was a paper towel, scribbled with numbers. "Becker's still alive," she said. "And sharper than a tax auditor, Mr. Louis Becker. Former attorney, old friend, stubborn as ever. We'd lost touch after Harold passed, but I remembered his home address by heart. I'd sent him a Christmas card every year, even when he didn't reply. But I couldn't exactly dial him up. Phones were still off limits. "Can you send a letter?" Janice asked. "I can do better than that," I said, reaching for my notebook. I wrote it like a riddle, carefully worded, hidden in a memory. I pretended it was a friendly update. "Dear Louie, do you remember the 5th grade play where we forgot the curtain call? It was fall 1965. We had to sneak out the back door of the gym. I keep thinking of that door these days. Sometimes I wonder if you still keep that extra key you always joked about. The one labeled, just in case. If you do, I may need it. Yours in confidence." D.L. Janice smuggled it out in her lunch bag and dropped it in the mail 2 towns over. That afternoon, I faked my worst lapse yet. Brian came by with a fresh polo shirt and that smug expression that made me want to hurl my applesauce at his forehead. "How's my favorite lady?" he chirped. I stared at him blankly. "Do I know you?" He laughed. "It's me, Grams. Brian." I tilted my head, then blinked slowly. "Brian? From the insurance company?" His face fell. "No, Grams. I'm your grandson." I leaned back and whispered, "Are you the one who brings the fish?" That did it. His whole face lit up like a slot machine. I could practically hear the internal gears clicking. He thought I'd finally cracked. Linda joined us 20 minutes later, reeking of too much perfume and condescension. "She called the janitor Dr. Cabbage this morning," Brian said, barely containing his glee. "Linda TSKED. It's progressing fast. Maybe we should speed up the care transfer," Brian said quietly. "Already in motion." They didn't even lower their voices. I looked out the window. The sky was a washed-out gray, just like the walls, just like the way they saw me now, faded, harmless, forgettable. Perfect. Later that night, Janice tapped twice on my door and slipped inside with her cart. "They took the bait," I said. "Oh, they swallowed it," she whispered, eyes wide. She handed me a note, folded in 4, written on thick stationery. Mr. Becker's reply. "DL, the key's still in the cigar box. The one marked, hush money. Tell the usher I'll be in the front row with my notes ready. Your old stage partner, LBI." Pressed the paper to my chest and laughed for the first time in weeks. Janice raised a brow. "He's in," I said, "and he knows exactly what to do." By the next morning, Janice and I had a plan. We'd use her phone once a week, discreetly, to upload documents and record conversations. Janice's cousin worked tech support at a law firm. He could scrub the metadata clean and send it straight to Becker's inbox. "You're running a full-blown sting operation," Janice muttered, shaking her head. "You know that, right?" "Principal Langston," I corrected her with a smirk. "And yes, I do." The only thing left was to bait them further. Brian came again that weekend, alone this time, and brought me a box of soft socks and lip balm like I was an invalid. He sat beside me and pulled out papers from his backpack. "They want to move you down the hall," he said. "It's a quieter ward." "Quieter," I repeated, blinking. Memory care, full service. I smiled like a fogged-up mirror. That sounds nice. You just have to sign this, he said, so we can adjust the permissions. I took the paper, pretended to squint. Is this for the fish? I asked. He chuckled. It's just a form, Grams. I'll take care of the rest. I held the pen, then dropped it. Oh dear, I said. I forgot how to write again. He scooped up the pen with a grin. No worries, I can do it for you. He forged my signature right there in front of me, and Janice, bless her, got it all on video. I looked at her, eyes burning. I know he would. Brian and Linda thought they'd buried me under beige walls and bingo schedules. But what they didn't realize is that I'd spent decades reading between the lines of children's excuses and parents' lies. I was trained in uncovering half-truths and turning them into full consequences. Now, it was my turn. The morning after Janice saw my notebook, she slipped into my room with a wink and a folded napkin. Message inside, she whispered, setting it on my tray like it was a slice of toast. Inside was a paper towel, scribbled with numbers. Becker's still alive, she said, and sharper than a tax auditor. Mr. Louis Becker, former attorney, old friend, stubborn as ever. We'd lost touch after Harold passed, but I remembered his home address by heart. I'd sent him a Christmas card every year, even when he didn't reply. But I couldn't exactly dial him up. Phones were still off limits. Can you send a letter? Janice asked. I can do better than that, I said, reaching for my notebook. I wrote it like a riddle, carefully worded, hidden in a memory. I pretended it was a friendly update. Dear Louie, do you remember the 5th grade play where we forgot the curtain call? It was fall 1965. We had to sneak out the back door of the gym. I keep thinking of that door these days. Sometimes I wonder if you still keep that extra key you always joked about, the one labeled just in case. If you do, I may need it. Yours in confidence, D.L. Janice smuggled it out in her lunch bag and dropped it in the mail 2 towns over. That afternoon, I faked my worst lapse yet. Brian came by with a fresh polo shirt and that smug expression that made me want to hurl my applesauce at his forehead. How's my favorite lady? He chirped. I stared at him blankly. Do I know you? He laughed. It's me, Grams, Brian. I tilted my head, then blinked slowly. Brian. From the insurance company? His face fell. No, Grams. I'm your grandson. I leaned back and whispered, Are you the one who brings the fish? That did it. His whole face lit up like a slot machine. I could practically hear the internal gears clicking. He thought I'd finally cracked. Linda joined us 20 minutes later, reeking of too much perfume and condescension. She called the janitor Dr. Cabbage this morning, Brian said, barely containing his glee. Linda TSKED. It's progressing fast. Maybe we should speed up the care transfer, Brian said quietly. Already in motion. They didn't even lower their voices. I looked out the window. The sky was a washed-out gray, just like the walls, just like the way they saw me now. Faded, harmless, forgettable. Perfect. Later that night, Janice tapped twice on my door and slipped inside with her cart. They took the bait, I said. Oh, they swallowed it, she whispered, eyes wide. She handed me a note, folded in 4, written on thick stationery. Mr. Becker's reply. D.L. The keys still in the cigar box. The one marked, Hush Money. Tell the usher I'll be in the front row with my notes ready. Your old stage partner, L.B.I. Pressed the paper to my chest and laughed for the first time in weeks. Janice raised a brow. He's in, I said, and he knows exactly what to do. By the next morning, Janice and I had a plan. We'd use her phone once a week, discreetly, to upload documents and record conversations. Janice's cousin worked tech support at a law firm. He could scrub the metadata clean and send it straight to Becker's inbox. You're running a full-blown sting operation, Janice muttered, shaking her head. You know that, right? Principal Langston, I corrected her with a smirk. And yes, I do. The only thing left was to bait them further. Brian came again that weekend, alone this time, and brought me a box of soft socks and lip balm like I was an invalid. He sat beside me and pulled out papers from his backpack. "They want to move you down the hall," he said. "It's a quieter ward." "Quieter," I repeated, blinking. "Memory care. Full service." I smiled like a fogged-up mirror. "That sounds nice. You just have to sign this," he said, "so we can adjust the permissions." I took the paper, pretended to squint. "Is this for the fish?" I asked. He chuckled. "It's just a form, Grams. I'll take care of the rest." I held the pen, then dropped it. "Oh dear," I said. "I forgot how to write again." He scooped up the pen with a grin. "No worries, I can do it for you." He forged my signature right there in front of me. And Janice, bless her, got it all on video. The devil's in the details, and Brian left a trail. Janice and I were careful. Every night, we reviewed our steps like surgeons prepping for delicate work. My notebook now held dates, witness names, a photocopy of the facility agreement Brian forged, and screen captures Janice took of Brian's social posts, with timestamps and locations. We weren't building a case anymore. We were building a noose. But I needed something bigger, proof that Brian knew he was stealing, and that he was doing it willfully. Not just mismanaging funds. I needed malice. That came from an unlikely place. Olivia, his ex. She used to come around when Brian still had a soul, back when he was bussing tables at the pub and dreaming about opening a record shop. She had a laugh like wind chimes and wore boots even in July. I liked her, though she always seemed too good for him. Apparently, she and Janice followed each other on social media. And one night, after seeing a post of Brian posing beside a luxury car, captioned, "Grams finally paid off. #blessed," Olivia messaged Janice directly. She didn't know much, but what she did know floored me. Brian had told her, months before my fall, that he had a plan to turn his life around. "He said you had a fat pension just sitting there," Olivia wrote, "and that once he got power of attorney, he'd move some numbers around." I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Then she told Janice about the business. Apparently, Brian had poured nearly $30,000 into a vape and gaming lounge outside of town, some half-baked investment scheme with a buddy from high school. It never even opened. They lost the lease after missing payments. Where did that $30,000 come from? My retirement account. It hit me like a slap. Years of scraping and saving. Coupons. Skipped vacations. I once reused tea bags for weeks when prices went up. And he spent it on neon lights and video games? Janice's hands trembled as she showed me the message. I sat there quietly for a long time. The TV in the rec room buzzed behind us. Another ad about arthritis medication and silver linings. "I don't want him to just lose access," I said. "I want him to lose everything he thinks he owns." Janice looked me dead in the eye. Then, "We need one more thing." His voice. We came up with a plan that same night. It was risky, but I was ready. Because here's the thing. Brian liked to talk, especially when he thought the other person wasn't listening. So we made sure he thought I wasn't. Janice hid her phone under my blanket and hit record. Then she called Brian and told him I'd had another spell, that I thought the microwave was my cat and tried to water it. That I'd asked to go home and forgotten where home even was. Brian showed up that evening, smelling like beer and car leather. "Oh, Grams," he said, fake pity dripping from his voice. "It's really happening, huh?" I stared at the window. He sighed, sat down heavily. "I gotta admit," he muttered, "you held on longer than I expected." I didn't blink. He leaned closer, speaking almost to himself. "Thing is, I didn't think it'd be this easy. POA went through like butter. No hiccups. Now I've got the whole thing running like clockwork." Janice's phone recorded every word. "You know," he said, chuckling, "I almost feel bad spending your money. Almost. But then I think about all the crap Linda and I had to deal with when Mom passed. How little you did. How tight you were. This is just balancing the scales." I almost snapped right then. But I didn't. He stood up, stretching. "Anyway, gotta bounce. Taking Jess to that sushi place you used to love. Guess I can afford it now." Then, As if reading from a villain's playbook, he muttered under his breath, "Old lady doesn't even remember her own name. Might as well put the rest of the account into crypto." And he left. Janice stepped out from the corner, face white. "It's all there," she whispered. "We got it." The audio file went straight to Becker. By midnight, it was backed up in 3 locations, encrypted, and forwarded to a journalist Becker trusted. Just in case anything mysterious happened to me before this could go public. The noose was tightening. Brian didn't know it yet, but the woman he left in that room, the one with the bib and the coloring book, she was coming for everything he touched. The next step had to be visual. A voice alone could be denied, brushed off, laughed at. But a video? Oh, that was different. It was Janice who suggested we go fishing. Not for compliments, but for ego. "People like Brian," she said. "They love hearing themselves talk. We just have to give him a stage." So we set one. I told the staff I wanted to have a lucid day. Said I was feeling unusually sharp. Word spread fast. Linda called within an hour. "You're coherent?" she said, surprised. "Mostly," I said cheerily. I remembered my father's birthday this morning. "Well, that's great, Doris." A lie, of course. My father was born in January, not June. But I said it like gospel. Brian came the next day, with Linda on his heels. She brought lemon muffins, the kind I used to bake for church potlucks. She thought I'd soften. I didn't. We met in the visitor lounge. Janice was working that shift. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. And she set her phone down on the magazine table, angled just right. The camera was running before they even sat down. Brian kicked things off. "You're looking sharp today, Grams," I smiled at the wall. "The fog lifts sometimes. It's strange. I can't remember where I put my socks, but I remember things you said." He stiffened. Linda chimed in. "We're just glad you're comfortable. This place really is the best, even if it's a little expensive." I tilted my head. "You pay out of pocket?" Brian laughed. "Nah, you do, technically." Linda swatted his arm. "Brian?" "What?" He grinned. "She doesn't even know what day it is." "Sometimes I do," I said quietly. "And I remember numbers, like account balances, like the total in the pension fund last October versus now." Silence. Brian cleared his throat. "It's all for your care, Grams." I nodded slowly. "Is that what the vape lounge was for?" His mouth opened, closed. "Then, that wasn't your money. That was mine. You don't have a job. Investments," he mumbled. I looked at him, my face blank. "And the birthday party?" He rolled his eyes. "Okay, fine. Maybe I dipped a little. But you weren't using it. You barely know what year it is." Linda laughed. Actually laughed. "She won't remember this tomorrow." "Wrong, sweetheart." Janice picked up the phone minutes later, slipped into the hallway, and uploaded the file straight to Becker's server. We had it. Their voices, their confessions, their arrogance, all on video. And Becker? He was ready to go nuclear. The story didn't break quietly. It burst. 3 days after Janice sent the video, Mr. Becker called the local station, the kind that covers county fairs and missing cats. But once they saw what he had, they bumped a mayoral debate to fit the story in. "Elderly woman outsmarts grandson who stole her pension," the headline read. They aired the footage raw. No voiceover, no cuts. Just me, in that sterile lounge, staring at my so-called family while they snickered over the crumbs of my life. The internet devoured it. By lunchtime, the clip had over 500,000 views. By dinner, it was on 3 national outlets. Hashtags started popping up. "Don't mess with Doris," #Granny Gotcha. Even Twitter, X, I guess they call it now, had me trending between a celebrity divorce and some viral cat in pajamas. I never had an account, but Janice read me the comments. "This lady is my new role model. If I ever get betrayed, I hope I have half the spine Doris does." She let them hang themselves with their own rope. Queen. I wasn't looking for fans. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel good. Linda, of course, went into panic mode first. She tried calling the facility, told the staff I'd been confused, that I liked to tell stories, and that this was all some manipulation by a disgruntled nurse. Janice just smiled and said, "Put it in writing." Brian went silent. No posts, no tweets. His Instagram disappeared. Even his gaudy TikToks were gone by the end of the day. But he wasn't smart enough to shut everything down. Mr. Becker had already compiled years' worth of evidence. Screenshots, transaction logs, public records showing the failed vape bar lease and the bank withdrawals matching my account. He even got an affidavit from Olivia. She emailed it the morning after the story aired. "I always thought something felt wrong," she wrote. "He told me Doris was rich and senile. Said it'd be his quote, 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 quote. I believed him. I was a fool. She wasn't. She just didn't know what kind of man she was dating." That night, I sat in the rec room with Janice, sipping warm tea from a styrofoam cup while the staff pretended not to hover. I wasn't invisible anymore. Now I was Mrs. Langston, and the aides stopped using the bibs real quick. I liked them better when they ignored me. "Becker says the state's opening an investigation," Janice whispered. I nodded. "He's also pushing for criminal charges, financial elder abuse, fraud, theft." Good. The best part? They had no idea how deep this would cut. Because Becker wasn't just some old man with a law license. He had friends. Friends who still worked in the courthouse. Friends who owed him favors from the days when he'd fought wrongful evictions and unpaid pensions for school teachers like me. Now he was calling in those favors. The next morning, a man in a press suit came to see me. Court investigator. Sharp eyes. Gentle voice. "Ms. Langston, we're reviewing all recent transfers under the power of attorney. We're also seeking to suspend it, temporarily, while the situation is assessed." I handed him my notebook. He flipped through it, silent, until he reached the last page, where I'd written, "They underestimated the wrong woman." He closed the cover slowly. "We don't get many like you." I smiled. "No, I imagine you don't." By the time lunch rolled around, the nursing home had a very different energy. I was no longer the lady with memory problems. I was the woman who brought down her grandson with a spiral notebook and a borrowed phone. And Brian? He was about to learn what it felt like to lose everything. By Monday morning, the legal wheels were turning. Not the slow, bureaucratic creak I expected, but something sharper. Purposeful. Like a blade sliding out of its sheath. Becker called first thing. "Power of attorney is frozen," he said, voice calm and clipped. "Effective immediately. You're back in control, Doris." I sank into the chair by the window, exhaled. He wasn't finished. "I filed a petition to reclaim your pension. We've subpoenaed Brian's accounts. The DA's office wants to talk." My chest tightened, not with fear, with relief, because for the first time in months, someone was actually listening. That afternoon, 2 investigators came to the facility, one for the court, one from Adult Protective Services. They sat with me in a little side room, usually used for family visits, their notepads open, voices soft but direct. I told them everything, from the day of the fall to the missing phone, from the fake tour to the pink bib. They didn't interrupt, just nodded and took notes. Janice brought in tea halfway through, and I saw one of the agents smile at her like he already knew she'd be a key witness. Afterward, he asked, "Is there anyone else you believe was complicit?" "Linda," I said. "She knew. She fed the story. She gaslit the staff." "We've seen the footage," he said. "It's compelling." That's when I realized something. This wasn't just a legal win. It was vindication. They believed me. That night, Becker called again, said the paperwork was moving faster than expected. They're issuing a cease and desist to Brian and Linda by morning. They can't touch a dime. Good. I hoped it stung. By the end of the week, the subpoenas went out. One to Brian's bank, another to the vape bar partner, one to Linda's employer, the same realty office where she once bragged about retirement-proofing her future. She'd posted about it, apparently. Secured our family's financial stability, thankful for smart planning. Becker had the screenshot. Meanwhile, Linda was unraveling. She tried calling the facility again, asked to speak to me, said she wanted to explain. I told Janice to send a message back. Mrs. Langston is unavailable. Please contact her attorney. It felt good. Better than I expected. But it wasn't over. Because a week later, the court set a date. Probate court. 9 a.m. Doris Langston versus Brian Langston and Linda Kerr. Becker sent over the documents by courier. Janice helped me highlight the key sections. I read them all 3 times, pen in hand, making notes like I was grading essays again. Misappropriation of funds, elder exploitation, intent to defraud. That last one hit different, because they'd looked me in the eye, both of them, and lied through their teeth. They thought I wouldn't remember. They thought I wouldn't matter. But now, they were the ones waiting to be called. In court, in public, with reporters circling like vultures. Becker showed up to the facility the night before the hearing, brought a new blouse, slacks, and a pair of sturdy shoes. I figured you might want something that feels like your old self, he said. I did. I dressed slowly that morning, brushed my own hair, did my own makeup, just a little rouge and mascara, enough to remind them I was still here, still sharp, still me. As we pulled up to the courthouse, I saw them. Brian, in a wrinkled blazer, pacing outside. Linda behind him, on her phone, jaw clenched. They didn't see me right away. But when they did, Brian's face dropped, pale as salt. I walked right past them, didn't say a word. Becker held the door for me like I was royalty. Inside, the courtroom buzzed. Local press sat in the back. A few strangers. Even Olivia showed up, sat behind us, hands folded in her lap. Janice, too, dressed in scrubs, whispering encouragement. When the bailiff called the case, I rose on my own. No walker, no nurse, just me, standing tall. And ready. They didn't know where to look. Brian sat 2 tables down, cheeks blotchy, fingers fidgeting with a broken pen cap. Linda was stiff beside him, lips pressed so tight they looked bloodless. And me? I sat beside Mr. Becker, hands folded, expression calm. Not smug, just steady. Let them wonder what I'd say, what I'd remember. The judge, a stern woman with steel gray hair and no time for foolishness, opened with the usual formalities. Then she looked right at me. Ms. Langston, are you well enough to testify? I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Brian snorted, loud enough to echo. Becker didn't flinch. Just passed me a small folder, neatly tabbed, labeled in my own handwriting. They took everything but my mind. I stood, walked to the witness stand, and told my story. I started at the fall, the surgery, the visit from Linda and Brian, the so-called tour that turned into a trap. I told them about the disappearing phone, the calls I wasn't allowed to make, the pink bib, the staff whispering behind closed doors. I kept my voice even, just the facts. But when I got to the power of attorney, I paused. I was tricked, I said, locking eyes with Brian. He told me it was a consent form for a tour. I trusted him. Brian shifted in his seat, eyes darting. The judge leaned forward. Did you read the document before signing? No, I said honestly, because my knee was throbbing, because I was in pain, because my own grandson stood beside me and said, "Don't worry, Grams, I'll take care of it." I let the silence sit. Then Becker stood and presented the exhibits, dozens of them. The notebook, the social media screenshots, the fake business investment, and finally, the crown jewel, the video recording, Janice's footage. Brian's face appeared on the courtroom screen, all charm and arrogance. Old lady doesn't even remember her own name. Might as well put the rest of the account into crypto. Linda's voice followed, casual and cruel. She won't remember this tomorrow. You could hear a pin drop. The judge's expression didn't change, but her pen started moving faster. Linda finally broke. That video was taken without consent, she shouted. This is all out of context. Brian was stressed. He was joking. The judge looked up. Mrs. Kerr, I'll remind you, this is a courtroom, not a cocktail hour. Linda sat back, seething. Then came Olivia. She testified with tears in her eyes about how Brian bragged about getting Doris's money, about how he called her senile and ripe for the picking. The judge nodded solemnly and thanked her for her honesty. Then Janice. She took the stand in her scrubs, badge still clipped to her pocket, and recounted what she'd seen. The forged signatures, the conversations, the deliberate misdiagnosis requests. She didn't forget anything, Janice said firmly. She was documenting. Every day. Brian tried to whisper something to his lawyer. Too late. The prosecutor stood. I'd like to submit additional evidence, she said. Text messages from Linda Kerr's phone, recovered through subpoena. The screen lit up again. Linda, she's too far gone to fight. Once Brian gets full control, we'll finally have breathing room. Linda, don't feel bad. Think of it as retirement redistribution. The courtroom gasped. The judge raised an eyebrow. I didn't react. I'd already seen them all. The final tally. Over $80,000 siphoned from my pension in 6 months. 3 separate forged documents. 2 business filings under Brian's name. Using my address. 1 attempted guardianship transfer filed just a week before the recording. The judge recessed for 30 minutes. When she returned, her words were swift. Power of attorney is permanently revoked. All assets are to be frozen until restitution is calculated. Brian opened his mouth. Do not speak, she snapped. To the court, you are now under investigation for financial exploitation, elder abuse, and perjury. Mrs. Kerr, you will be evaluated for your role in conspiracy and fraud. Linda burst into tears. Brian just stared ahead, dead-eyed. I sat back, still as stone. They didn't even look at me when they were escorted out. But I looked at them. I wanted them to remember that face. Not the one they left in a nursing home. Not the one they dressed in infantilizing bibs and coloring books. This face. The one that never forgot. The judge asked if I wanted to make a statement. I said yes. I rose from my seat. Not with help, not with a walker, and walked slowly to the center of the courtroom. Becker didn't need to coach me. I knew exactly what I needed to say. I looked out at the room, at the strangers watching, at the reporters scribbling notes. Then I looked at Brian. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Good. Your Honor, I began, voice steady. I was a school principal for 34 years. That means I've seen every kind of lie a child can tell, and every excuse a parent can invent to defend it. But nothing prepared me for the day my own grandson told the world I didn't remember my name. I paused. No one moved. I raised Brian like a second son. I helped his mother pay her rent. I bought his first laptop for college. I gave him groceries when he was broke. Paid for the rehab he said he needed after that second DUI. Never once asked for thanks. Because that's what family does. My throat tightened. I swallowed it down. But family does not mean ownership. It does not mean entitlement. And it sure as hell doesn't mean stealing from someone while they're still breathing just because you've decided they're inconvenient. Someone in the back gasped quietly. I kept going. When they locked me in that facility and took my phone, they thought I'd go quiet. They thought I'd fade. That age made me weak. But they forgot one thing. I looked at Brian. Finally, he looked up. Just for a second. I remember. I let that hang. I remember what it feels like to teach a girl to read when her mother told her she was stupid. I remember what it feels like to hold a crying boy in the nurse's office who just learned his dad wasn't coming home. I remember standing in front of a classroom of 5th graders during 9/11, trying to explain what evil looks like without breaking. I stepped forward, just slightly. And now I remember this. The betrayal, the manipulation, the insult of being told I was lucky to have a bed in a hallway and a bib on my chest, like I wasn't a whole person. Linda buried her face in her hands. I ignored her. Do you know what that kind of loneliness does to a person? Not just the isolation, the erasure, the way people stop looking you in the eye. The way staff start using baby talk. The way your own name gets left off documents. Because it's easier that way. I turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I don't need pity. And I don't need revenge. What I need is for people like Brian and Linda to know that actions have consequences. That age is not permission to rob someone blind. That kindness is not stupidity. And that silence is not weakness. I felt my chest rise, breath sharp and clean. They tried to write me out of my own life, but I kept the receipts. And now I'm here to cash them in. I stepped back. Silence filled the room. The judge nodded once. Becker gave the faintest of smiles. And then it happened. A woman in the gallery, older, silver curls tucked behind her ears, stood and clapped once. Then another joined, and another. Before long, the whole back row was on their feet, clapping. For me. I didn't cry. I just stood there, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Seen. Heard. Whole. As the bailiff called order, I walked back to my seat. Brian was crying now. Quiet, angry tears. Linda looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Let them. They had tried to make me disappear. But I rose anyway. The sentence came 2 weeks later. Brian was charged with felony elder abuse, financial fraud, and identity theft. 3 counts. No bail reduction. He took a plea deal to avoid trial, but part of that deal meant repaying every last penny he stole, $84,000 in change, and that didn't include court fees. The DA called his actions calculated and predatory. Linda didn't walk away clean either. She wasn't charged criminally, but the judge ruled her as a co-conspirator. That meant restitution, no inheritance rights, and a public record that made her license as a realtor difficult. Last I heard, she was trying to sell makeup through live streams, the kind with filters and fake lashes. I didn't watch, didn't care, because I was busy packing. 2 months after the hearing, I left that nursing home for good. The same place that once locked my door now held it open for me. The administrator shook my hand, eyes damp. We've changed a few things because of you, she said. Updated our protocols. Staff are being retrained on elder rights. Good, I said. See that you follow through. She nodded, then handed me a clipboard. It was a patient rights form. I signed it in black ink. My own name, steady hand. Janice walked beside me out to the curb, holding my suitcase in one hand and a bouquet of fresh tulips in the other. I'll miss you, she said. You made this place less scripted. You made it survivable, I replied. She smiled. You're kind of a legend now. Oh, I was a legend before this, I said, lifting my chin. But now I've got headlines. We laughed, hugged. She slipped something in my coat pocket before we parted. Later, I found a little silver pin, an apple, teacher style. On the back was a note. You taught me more than school ever did. Jay. That one got me. Right in the chest. I moved back into my home a week later. Yes, my home. Brian had tried to sell it, of course. Becker made sure the deed stayed intact. We found the forged documents tucked in a file labeled Graham's Estate Prep. Charming. He never even got the name of the house right. Called it Grandma's Cabin on paperwork. It was a 1958 2-bedroom ranch. Not a cabin. But it was mine again. And I filled it with the quiet I'd been missing. Not the silence of loneliness, but the kind that follows justice. The kind that lets you sleep without a light on. Neighbors brought casseroles. Some I liked, some I didn't. One lady brought a sign that said, Granny Justice lives here. I stuck it in the garden, let the weeds work around it. And then something unexpected happened. The local high school called. Apparently, one of their history teachers had read my story aloud during a civics unit. They asked if I'd come speak to the senior class. I'm not exactly current, I told them. You're exactly what they need, the principal replied. I showed up in slacks and flats, told him my story without softening the edges. Told them about the bib, the silence, the fight. They asked how I stayed so calm. I didn't, I told them. I acted calm, and that was the truth. I stayed 2 hours longer than planned, answered every question, took a photo with a girl who said her grandma was going through something similar. I'm gonna help her, she whispered. You already have, I said. Letters started arriving the next week. From seniors, from caregivers, from strangers across the country who saw the video. They sent poems, prayers, donations to elder rights organizations in my name. One even sent a framed print. You don't fade, you fight. I hung it above my kitchen table. And every time I saw it, I remembered. They wanted to erase me. Instead, I became unforgettable. The first morning back in my own home, I brewed real coffee. None of that institutional sludge from the nursing home. This was strong, dark roast with a hint of cinnamon, the way Harold used to like it. I poured it into my chipped blue mug and sat on the porch, blanket across my knees, listening to birds fuss in the trees. And for the first time in nearly a year, I felt it. Peace, not the kind you beg for, the kind you earn. A few weeks later, Janice started coming by twice a week, not as a nurse, just as a friend. She'd bring takeout or fresh tomatoes from her mother's garden. I'd make us iced tea, and we'd sit under the old magnolia tree out back, swapping stories. I'm still waiting for your TED Talk, she'd tease. Keep waiting, I'd grin. I prefer porches to stages. But word had gotten out anyway. A local magazine ran a feature titled, The Principal Who Outsmarted Greed. My photo was on the cover. Me in the garden, gloves on, grinning like I'd just pulled weeds and told off a judge, which I had. Then the school board called. They wanted to honor me at the Fall Educators Banquet, Lifetime Contribution Award. Not for what happened in court, but for my decades in the classroom. I almost said no. Didn't want the pity party. Didn't want the spotlight for surviving something I never should have had to. But Becker said something that stuck. You're not being honored for surviving, Doris. You're being honored for teaching people how to survive. So I went. Wore the same navy dress I'd worn to Harold's retirement dinner. It still fit. When they called my name, I stood slow, steady. Walked to the podium with no cane, no notes. Just heart. I told them what I told those high schoolers. It's not about strength, I said. It's about memory. About refusing to forget who you are just because someone else wants you small. The crowd rose to their feet. Somewhere in the back, I spotted Olivia. She waved. I nodded. She'd gone back to school, I heard, studying to be a social worker. Told Janice she wanted to help other women spot the warning signs. Good. Let something good come from all that rot. A month later, I received a letter from a woman in Vermont. Said she'd watched my video with her mother, who was about to be forced into a facility she didn't need. They saw what I did and decided to fight it. We're staying home, she wrote. Mom and me, because of you. I read that line 3 times and cried. Not out of grief, out of knowing I still mattered. One crisp October morning, I heard a knock on the door. Janice, standing there with a wide grin and a box under one arm. What's this? You'll see. Inside was a little plaque. Burnished wood. Gold engraving. The Doris Langston Center for Elder Advocacy. Turns out Janice had partnered with Becker's old firm. They were starting a local initiative. Free legal consults, public seminars, resources for at-risk elders. We wanted to name it after someone who fought back, she said. I touched the plaque, heart beating like a drum. You sure you want to put my name on a building? She smirked. You earned it. I hung it in my living room, right next to my wedding photo, and my retirement certificate. And that sign someone gave me, Granny Justice lives here. Because now, she did. They say time heals, but I've learned it doesn't always. Sometimes it just reveals. Reveals who stays when your name's no longer useful. Reveals who disappears when the money runs out. Reveals who you really are when the world tries to erase you. I was supposed to be forgotten. Left in a hallway with coloring books and soft food, praised for being sweet when what they really meant was silent. But I chose something else. I chose to remember. Remember who I am, what I've done, what I deserve. And now, I sit here, tea in hand, porch lights dimmed, the hum of evening settling over the neighborhood like a lullaby. My home, still mine. The flowers outside are blooming again. Janice helped plant a new hydrangea bush. We call it the watchdog. Grows big, round, loud-colored blooms that lean toward the street like they're keeping score. Becker sends cards now. Mostly jokes about retirement and how I could run for mayor. Olivia, she visits every now and then. Always brings pie. She's found peace, I think. A quiet life, a path forward. And me? I'm not angry anymore. But I'm not soft either. There's a line in every life where you decide. Right there. That's the moment I stopped shrinking to make other people comfortable. That was my nursing home hallway. My bib. My blank stares. That was the moment I began writing. And the moment I started fighting. So now I ask you, what would you do if your family betrayed you for money? Would you fold into the story they wrote for you? Or would you play along, smile sweetly, while you rewrote the ending? Would you let them believe you'd lost your memory while you quietly recorded every move? Would you stay silent? Or would you wait for the perfect moment to make sure they never forgot? Think about it. And if the day ever comes, don't panic. Just start writing.